welcome to the My Father Said podcast, where we discuss all things faith, finance, and family. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan. I'm both a father and a son.
And I'm Robert. I'm Ryan's dad, and I'm a father as well, and a son.
And today, the question we have is debt the enemy of your financial success? That's the question we want you to have while we're going through this podcast. A couple of things we want to go over today. We want to give you guys some scripture, specifically from Proverbs, that discusses the Bible's attitude towards debt. Some other things we want to do is we want to talk about how debt can affect you in your health, your finance, your psychology, your marriage, your relationships. We want to talk about stuff like that. And then we want to end it with some strategies on ways to get out of it. We don't want it to be all doom and gloom from the beginning to the end.
I'm depressed already. You're talking about debt. This is sad.
So that's what we want to get into. And so we'll go ahead and jump right away.
I think I'm going to go over there. Speaking of jump, I'm going to go over there and stand on the edge of that cliff and just hurl myself off. That's what the topic of debt actually makes me think about.
You're debt free though, so it shouldn't be bothering you.
Still, just a conversation.
Just talking about debt. Good. Well, we're going to make sure this is the longest podcast we've had. if that's how it makes you feel, we're going to do that. But no. So what we're going to be looking at today is Proverbs 22. There's actually two separate passages in this same chapter where Scripture talks about debt. So Proverbs 22, verse 7, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Why do you think they use the word slave there?
Well, because you have no say. You are at the beck and call of your master, and the master is
MasterCard.
There you go. The master is the lender. And when the master says, I'm hungry, feed me, you best have some food prepared.
Yeah. Speaking of not having a say in it, going down to Proverbs 22, verses 26 and 27, do not be one who shakes hand in pledge or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched from under you. So talking about, hey, when I want it now. If you owe the bed, they can come get it. Same thing with the house and the car.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That is the truth. If you owe money and you are starting to fall behind and you miss those payments, they will come and collect what is rightfully theirs and leave you standing on the side of the street.
Yep. So talking about some of that debt, talking about what people owe, some of the things we wanted to tell you guys is just so far into 2024, what are some of the national averages when it comes to debt? Some of the numbers we found were in 2024, the average debt per American is $104,215. That's per American. Now, that could be made up of mortgage, student loans, credit cards, whatever the case, any type of debt. They're saying that the average debt an American owns or has is a little over $104,000.
That's a individual, not a married couple?
Correct. That's an individual.
So a married couple is twice that.
Yeah. So think about it. You buy let's say you've got no debt whatsoever, and then you buy a house for $300,000 and it's you and your spouse. Yep. Well, now you guys are 150. So
I see.
Yep. So there's that. Some of the other stuff we found out was the average American is spending $740 a month on car payments. To put that in perspective, that is more money put away than you would need to max out a Roth IRA. So you can say, hey, I'm going to put this much money into a car, right? It's a debt that you owe and the car's going to break down at some point. Or you could max out a Roth IRA. That is what these numbers are telling us is people have more monthly debt payments than they do the amount it would take to max out an IRA.
So what you're telling me is every time I see one of those Teslas riding down the interstate, I'm seeing an unfunded IRA riding down the interstate is what you're telling me.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Tesla. Electric vehicles, and you can ask your CPA about this, there is like a tax credit for purchasing that. So maybe they're doing some tax planning, some tax strategies.
That might be something like that.
Could be it.
Or could be they just figured out that it's a bad mistake to be driving electric cars in a country that runs on fossil fuels, and they're trying to now dig a hole out of it. Yeah, but I regress.
Yeah. So the other numbers that we found out was the average American has right under $8,000 on each credit card. So let's take a married couple, for example. The average is showing us, hey, if husband has a credit card, wife has a credit card, they both have right at $8,000 of credit card debt. All of a sudden, their family's got $16,000 worth of credit card. And again, this isn't everybody. These are just the averages.
So if you have 3 credit cards, it's 3 times 8. 4 credit cards, it's 4 times 8. Mm-hmm. So there's a debt restriction strategy right there. Just only have 1 card.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And you got to think about it. If you're to the point where you're maxing out a credit card, you're probably not in the best situation. And if the card is maxed out, your thought process might be, oh, well, let me just get another card so I've got some limit. I can float whatever I've got going on. And now all of a sudden you've started this cycle.
God, I can put my entire retirement on credit. Man, think about that.
If it worked that way, that'd be great.
Well, that's what Washington's doing. I mean, up in D.C., that's what our politicians are doing. They're putting our retirement future on credit. But what do they care?
Yeah, right. They're going to be dead by then, right? Yeah. They're all 100 years old.
They're all elected officials, and the naive, dumb, stupid public that keeps voting them back in the office, why would they expect any different? But again, I regress. I am in a mood today. I hope this passes our compliance department.
The other thing that we found out is just talking about some expenses. This isn't really a debt. This is just this will go into effect later. We'll refer to this. But the average American is spending $160, $165 a month eating out. So not groceries, nothing like that, just going to restaurants and things like that.
Seems low.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. We think we sat here, it was me, Robert, our producer Scott, and then one of the other advisors we have in here, Tim. We were talking, and that seems like a low number, but for argument's sake, we'll keep that number, say, hey, the average is 160. Or if you're married, you're looking at $300+ a month on food eating out. So those are some of the numbers. Those are some of the averages that we saw while we were preparing for this podcast.
So now the question, of course, is, as stated earlier, is debt the enemy of your financial future? And I will surmise by saying to you, in all of my years of doing financial planning, 99.9% of the time, absolutely, it is the enemy of your financial future. There's some pundits will actually say there's good debt out there, like investment debt, real estate debt. Mm-hmm. And I think if you go into that environment right and you do it correctly, I think that's a good debt that you can leverage and maybe come out ahead on. But the majority of the debt that we're speaking to you about today is consumer debt.
Sure. Yeah.
So how does debt affect us in our retirement planning? I've got several options I want to share with you today about how it affects us, and I want you to consider these. Now, not to insult our listeners, I probably already have a while ago when I said something about politics again, but not to insult our listeners.
Or if you drive a Tesla, he wasn't throwing that at you, but if you drive one, he thinks you're an idiot.
No, I hope none of our clients are driving Teslas and they hear this. But I'm going to give you a Captain Obvious moment. You know what I'm talking about with Captain Obvious, that old commercial that used to come on TV when the guy would say something, it'd be like, duh, yeah, that's right. Well, I'm going to give you some Captain Obvious things that maybe you hadn't come across your mind, but once it is spoken aloud and you're listening to it, it seems like you're hearing it for the very first time, and it's like, oh, that's obvious. That's nothing new. Well, sometimes we need to go back to the foundations to figure out why things are as they are. Debt can significantly impact our retirement planning just off the basis that it reduces the amount of money we have available to save.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you stop and think about it, if I'm making $1,000 a week and I'm spending $700 on my car payment, then I've still got groceries, gas, electricity, other things I've got to pay for. Mm-hmm. If there's no money left, then I cannot be setting aside money for my retirement savings.
Right.
So it hinders the ability to accumulate significant savings that we discussed in some earlier podcasts by allowing money to compound year over year over year over year to create some of those incredible numbers that we spoke about in an earlier episode. So reduced savings is one of the things. And when your savings are reduced, you cannot save money. The next thing that happens is that idea that, gosh, I'm in my 60s, I'm in my 65 area, and I look at my Social Security amount, and I see that Social Security is going to be probably 40% of what my average income is. Then I come to realize I cannot retire.
Right. Yeah.
So I've got to delay retirement. So instead of retiring at 65, now I'm going to have to work until I'm in my 70s, 75, or wait until I drop dead before I actually have a day off.
Yeah.
And that's no fun. So carrying debt into retirement is not advisable at all.
No. Yeah.
That's not advisable. That's something that we try to get our clients to concentrate heavily on, that there comes a time when, as we're approaching retirement, it's right around the corner, that dream of retirement, we got to look at, hey, how much debt am I carrying? And do I want to carry this into retirement? And our answer is no, you do not.
Right.
You want to go into retirement debt-free. Debt-free. Another area that we look at is the higher expenses that it comes with having debt. I was in a meeting yesterday with a local attorney here by the name of Lee Haygood of the Haygood Law Firm. He is a real estate attorney. And Lee was talking to me, and he made this comment. He shared with me this amortization schedule on a mortgage.
For those of Scott, since he doesn't know what an amortization schedule is, will you tell Scott what that is?
Amortization schedule is when your lender provides you with a schedule of your normal payments so that you can see over the length of time on the agreed upon contract of the money you borrowed, how long will you pay that back based on your agreed upon monthly payment, and the overall cost for borrowing that money that you would have paid back over the term of that loan. So in this case, Lee yesterday showed us a schedule of a 30-year mortgage. He didn't put the interest rate on there. He had redacted a bunch of information on it so you couldn't see whose information this was.
Sure, yeah.
But in essence, they got a 30-year mortgage. They paid 30 years worth on it. The mortgage is $200,000. And if they just make the normal payment, by the time that 30 years is up, they're paying back $498,000.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, if that doesn't depress you, I know the American dream is to have a home, but if you stop and think about it, if you bought the house for $200,000 and by the time you paid it back, it's $498,000. I wonder what the value of the house is at that time. I imagine it's going to be somewhere around $498,000, I would hope.
I would hope. Yeah.
I would hope. But even so, we looked at the mortgage and just realized, my gosh, what if I had just jumped all over this mortgage and paid on it and got ahead of it and in front of it? Because basically for the first, I believe it was 20 years, you were paying more mortgage each month than you were paying in principal.
Yeah.
And, carrying a debt like that for so long, you just got to know that, hey, I can swing this payment. Well, that's great. But when you're retired, you cannot spend the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing, it's like, hey, right now you're working. I'm not retired yet. I can afford this payment. That's great. And the bank, if you couldn't, the bank wouldn't have approved you. But the question is, should you afford it?
Yeah.
So if I've got $2,000 of discretionary income each month and my mortgage is $2,000, yeah, you can afford that, but are you going to be able to put anything into retirement? And so then you're in the situation of, hey, I got this nice house and everything, but effectively I am house poor.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not a good way to be. And I remember when Lee was sharing this information with us yesterday, I remember sitting there and I looked over to, you remember Frank Thomas was on one of our early podcasts. And I looked over to Frank and I said, God, man, this is depressing. I mean, when you hear it, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm grateful that our mortgage has long been gone. But I sit there and I think, my gosh, the person who's laying in bed at night, when they start playing with these numbers in their head, they have got to feel like there's no end to this. I'm never going to get out of this hole.
Right.
So they've got to be aggressive and they've got to be intent about getting this paid off. And we're going to talk about this in just a few minutes, but they've got to be aggressive about this, because if you just let your mortgage happen to you,
right, yeah,
instead of you happening to your mortgage, it's going to eat you up. And along that way, it leads into what debt does to you. It increases financial stress. Mm-hmm. Now, I will tell you, as someone who has battled high blood pressure and who is a type A personality,
yes,
which I doubt any of our listeners has picked up on any of that in any of the previous episodes, but I will tell you, this kind of stuff creates anxiety and anguish in an individual that they just cannot rest. I mean, it's just knowing that you are you have put yourself in a debtor's prison, that you have handcuffed yourself to some bank somewhere that essentially owns you. And if you don't believe it, lose your job, lose your income for about 3 months.
Yeah.
And notice when they start sending you those letters in the mail, it's like pay or else. And, it's what an awful place to be. Mm-hmm. What an awful place to be. And, the reason that scripture is in the Bible is because our Lord never meant for us to live in debt. Mm-hmm. That's why the Lord put that information in there, so that we would recognize the dangers of entering into a contract debt of significant amounts to just try to keep up with our neighbors and look as good as they look on the outside, not recognizing that at night over in their house, they might be arguing and fighting all night long because they just can't seem to get out of each other's way. And the audacity of thinking that each credit card has an average of $8,000 on it. It's not the 8,000 that bothers me so much. It's the each word. Mm-hmm. It's like you open up the purse and, now you look in that purse and you glance and you say, oh, there's 7 cards in there. And the average is 8,000 per card.
And then you got to think about that. And then the interest rate on those credit cards is usually double digits.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get out of it. And, going back to some of the scripture stuff and how you're saying, hey, the Lord didn't intend for us to live in debt. You got to think about that. If you are in debt and you are having to work longer, you're having to work harder, you have to be more tight with your money, that really gets in the way of generosity, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I don't have time to go and serve in my community. Now I don't have time to go and share the gospel, right? Because I'm going to work to get out of this hole. Or, hey, I can't tithe, right? I know I'm supposed to tithe, but I can't right now because I've got all this debt. So having all of this debt, really, especially for believers, it's just, you are really out of step with the way God wants us to operate, just because your hands are tied. Again, you are a slave to the debtor.
Absolutely. I think that if you're ever sitting in front of some place and you're getting ready to sign an agreement to purchase a car, purchase a house, purchase a boat, purchase a swimming pool in your backyard, whatever it might be, if as you're sitting there with that pen in your hand, if you do not start becoming afraid as you get ready to sign your name on that dotted line, then you are not giving debt the due respect that it needs.
Yeah.
Because debt is a destroyer of your future. Mm-hmm. And you keep piling it on, you are mortgaging your future happiness away from your family, your children, the things you can do together, the memories you can build. You are taking it away. If bringing on a new debt does not cause you anxiety and discomfort, even if it's a needed debt,
right? Yeah.
If it doesn't cause you discomfort and anxiety, then you're not looking at it correctly, and you're going down a very dangerous path.
Yeah, the good analogy on debt, and normally it's this is attributed to credit cards, but it's just debt in general. It's like a chainsaw, right? Mm-hmm. It has a set purpose. It is a tool, but if you don't give it respect and you play around with it, you can cut your arm off. Yeah. So that's it. When you go to use a chainsaw, there is some mutual respect there. I've got to pay attention to this. I've got to be serious. And if you don't go to debt with that same thought process, Next thing you know, you're in a hole for 15 years trying to pay off all this debt.
Absolutely. That is the truth. So how do you address these things? How, you recognize, if you're out there listening to us and you recognize that you've got this debt and this debt is upon you, and what Ryan and I are talking about today is hitting home with you as you're driving home or as you're sitting at the house looking at us on YouTube. If it's hitting home with you and you think, well, yeah, that's great, and I agree with you because that's where I find myself, and yeah, life is hard and I just can't seem to get my head above water, but what do I do about it? Well, to start with is, first and foremost, and this is the most important thing, is you have got to decide that you are no longer going to be a slave. You have got to decide that you're going to start behaving in a financially responsible manner to where you are going to make decisions, be however incremental they may be, but you're going to make decisions that no more. Dave Ramsey says you've got to get, I think he uses the phrase gazelle mad.
Gazelle intense.
Yeah, gazelle intense. But you have got to make the decision to where you are no longer going to live like this. And you got to stick to it. And there's going to be a lot of distractions along the way. Let me give you some examples. Birthdays, Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
That vacation, this new gadget, smart TVs, and whatever the next thing is. I've got to get these things, and because I got to get them. And my child needs these things because their child has these things, and my child can't be left behind.
Here's another one that no one ever talks about. Car repairs. Oh, I didn't know the car was going to mess up. I couldn't plan for that. Yes, you can. You know that no cars last forever. There is going to be an issue there, right? So, like, that's one thing.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. How many cars have you had?
Well, we ain't gonna talk about it. But anyway, you have got to make. That's the very first thing. If you want to get out of debt, you've got to decide, no more. I'm going to get out of debt. Now, look, today we're doing this podcast today. I think today is Thursday. You decide today on Thursday you're going to get out of debt. I promise you're not going to be out of debt by Thursday evening.
No.
It took you a while to get into debt, to get to where the numbers you're at are, and it's going to take you longer to get out of the debt. It's easier to get into it than it is to get out of it, but you've got to be faithful and committed. The very first thing you have to do is you have to decide what your number is, what your lifestyle number is. And we're going to do a podcast on this in the future, but let me just share a little bit about that with you. You're making, again, let's say $1,000 a week, and you've made the decision, the conscious decision that I'm going to live on $500 only. And that other $500 is going to go to these obligations. Sure, you may have to reduce your lifestyle now, but what you're doing is you have made a decision that I'm going to live on lower income right now while I address the decisions I've made earlier and try to get myself out from under all of these people that I owe money to. It does two things for you. You've got a mind, it changes your mindset, because now you've got a plan. You don't feel so distressed and doomed. Even though you know it's a long journey, you know that you are taking the journey.
Right.
And that changes your mindset. In addition, it gets you accustomed on living on less than your income. And that is one of the number one secrets our millionaires have shared to us. How did they accumulate? They didn't spend 100% of their income.
Right, yeah.
They spent much less and accumulated the rest of it. So you create a budget. The next thing you want to do is you want to prioritize your debt, because, most people don't have just one debt. They got numerous debt.
Yeah.
And there's two methods out there, too, about paying off debt. And, it's either one works. It just depends on which one you like to go for. One of them's called the debt avalanche method. And what the debt avalanche is you take your debt, you line them up. Your debt that has the largest balance, irregardless of interest rate, the debt that has the largest balance, you pay it, and your other debt that you have, you pay the minimum payments on that. Any monies you have left over, you throw back to the largest balance. And theoretically, over time, you have maybe paid off some of those smaller debts along the way, but one day you've got this debt, and then the next month that debt is gone because you've been throwing all your extra money toward that. Now, that's a long and tedious process.
Yes.
And, if you don't have a lot of stamina, and if you like to see some successes along the way, I think it's going to take a while to do that, especially determining the size of the debt that you're trying to do the avalanche method to.
Right.
The other method is called the snowball. The snowball is the one I like. It's the
Yep.
one I use to get out of debt.
Yep.
And basically, you do the same thing. You lay your debts out. You start with the smallest one. You make your minimum payments on everything else. You make your extra money to the smallest one. When you get the smallest one paid for, you take that payment and the extra and you put it on the next debt that's in line, and it's like a snowball effect, and you give yourself some rewards and some accomplishments along the way, and you actually visibly get to see, hey, I'm making progress.
Right.
Now, of course, the other thing that you got to do along this journey when you're doing the snowball is you've got to quit using credit.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
You got to quit. You cannot continue using credit while you're I saw something on Facebook the other day, one of those little things where people put those little short films on Facebook, and it was showing this guy sitting in front of a boat, chunking out water as fast as he could, and in the back of the boat, sitting on the bank, was this woman chunking in water just as fast as he was chunking it out, and he was never looking behind him, and he was never getting anywhere, and I sit there and I looked at that, and I said, you know what? That is the American consumer right there when it comes to debt.
Yeah.
Somebody's trying to get it out while another one's putting it in. And a lot of times you have married couples that are not on the same sheet of music.
Yeah.
And it just causes more distress. So debt destroys. I mean, it is not something that's good. It's a bad thing. And I'm saying a lot. I'm not giving you a chance to jive in. Anything you want to share here, or because I can go on and on about debt.
Yeah. So some of the things, and we should have made this a bullet point. I didn't even think to do it, but when it comes to paying off debt, getting out of debt, staying out of debt, we could give you 100 ways to do that, 100 strategies. But the biggest thing is it's mental.
Yeah.
You get that through your head first, then the strategy will follow. So, we've talked about the book, The Richest Man in Babylon.
Right.
And we will probably talk about that numerous more times as we do this podcast. But you were talking about, hey, decide I'm going to get out. I'm going to be done with debt. I'm going to finish it. There's a passage in The Richest Man of Babylon where someone's talking to somebody and they say, hey, do you have the soul of a free man, or do you have the soul of a slave? If you've got the soul of a slave, and hey, I'm fine with this debt, this podcast probably isn't for you. But if you're like, no, I am a free man, I am a free woman, I want to take a hold of my debt, my life, my retirement, you got to make the decision. It's such a small thing, but it's small hinges open big doors.
Yeah,
right. So
that's good. I like that.
So yeah, so it's.
Did you just make that up?
No, I think I heard that yesterday, and I can't figure out where. But I heard that.
I'm about to say we should claim it if you don't know. 'Cause I like that. Small hinges open big doors.
Yeah, small hinges move big doors. And then the second thing, going back to the mental stuff, the snowball effect as opposed to the avalanche effect. The snowball method is great. Both of them work. Both of them get you out of debt. But if I had to pick one, it's going to be the snowball. And the reason being is if you're doing the avalanche, it is going to take you a long time to see process because you're going after that biggest one first. But when you get that big one, now you're reaping all the benefits, right? You get to see all of that. The snowball effect, you're paying off this little one, and there's this hit of endorphins and serotonin, and I've had this little victory, and you do it with the next one, and now all of a sudden you are gaining momentum, and you have these milestones along the way. That does wonders for people who are trying to get out of it because they start to see some of the success along the way. So
yeah, but again, we got to reiterate, you've got to quit using credit along the way. You're not going to get out of debt if you're constantly collecting debt and accumulating debt. It does not work that way. I know Dave Ramsey, I mentioned him earlier today. He's probably going to call me and ask me for some money since I've used his name a couple of times. But I know he has a saying too. His saying is, live today like no one else, so in the future you can live like no one else.
Right.
And that's exactly what he means. You got to decide the very first thing, and that's the most important. You can lay out the best strategy. You can put the best plan, the most comprehensive plan for an individual to follow. But they have got to decide that this is the gospel, and they're going to follow it, and no one or no thing is going to deter them from following it. And they're going to miss out on some things.
Yep.
They're going to miss out on perhaps some parties, some engagements, some hangovers. Yeah, they're probably going to miss out on some things. I mean, they're going to miss out on some things. But hey, I mean, you know, I'm just going to say it. It's a nice place to be when you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice place to be. So that's just some of the things that we tell people to do. You know, negotiate the lower interest rates. You know, if you carry in debt and your credit card debt is 21%, I'm not a big proponent of getting another card, but why not transfer that 21% debt to one of these cards that is 0% debt for 6 months, or 0% interest, for 6 months. And when that 6 months is up, move it to another one.
Yeah.
Now, of course, what you got to do is as you move, the card you just moved from, you got to close it.
You have to. So we are not saying go and get a bunch of credit cards, right? We're absolutely not saying that. But if you've decided, hey, I'm going to get out of debt now, what are those strategies? A credit card debt is a huge problem. And so the credit card transfer, that is a good strategy. And the reason being is you might have a credit card that's at 10%, 12%, or God forbid it's an adjustable one and it's at like 20% right now. God forbid. If you're in there, you could say, hey, I'm tired. The majority of the money I'm throwing at this credit card is going to interest. Close that credit card, transfer the balance to another one. A lot of those credit cards, they'll do 6 months or 12 months of a promotional period where there's 0% interest. Now, what you can do is if you have no wiggle room whatsoever in your budget and you can still only make the same payment, well, now you're making that payment and all of the money you're throwing at it is going to the principal. It's not going at the interest rate. That's one of the first steps. Again, that only works if you cancel the existing credit cards, because now if all of a sudden you've got one credit card and you just freed up the balance on another one, I can go max both of them out. That's not what we're saying. Please don't do that.
Yeah. We're coming up on April 15th, which some people get tax refunds. And, you know, that can be a little small windfall depending on how much they've overpaid throughout the year. They can take that windfall and apply it to debt. Now,
That's right.
for the person who just likes to enjoy things, that's probably not very fun. But for the person who has made the decision, I'm getting out of this, I'm not going to be a slave to a lender ever again in the rest of my life, that windfall, I know what they're going to do with it.
Yeah.
They're going to take it straight to the smallest debt and knock that out and hopefully affect the second debt and get closer to getting that one paid off. So using windfalls wisely, that's a great way to do it. They can automate payments to their debt to where it's just like, well, it is a bill. Yeah. But it's instead of just waiting for the bill to come to you, you automate a payment going to it so that it's coming out each month. Yeah,
that, and again, the average person has multiple debts. We don't see this all the time, but there is a chance that if you've got these debts and you're married and you've got kids and you're working and then, what do you know, I forgot to make a payment. Now I've got a late fee on top of everything. Automating those payments, it takes the chance of you forgetting out.
Yeah.
Now you might not pay extra on it right out the bat, but you're not getting hit with late fees because you've automated it.
Yeah, and you got to have the, well, wait a minute, that automation thing. Can I make one payment to the credit card with one of the other cards opened up?
I don't know. I know you can transfer it. I don't know if you can pay one credit card bill with another credit card.
Again, man, that's like putting credit on your retirement. I never had to pay back anything.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it just put about 5 credit cards in there. Each one pays the other one.
Just cycle them. There you go.
I mean, there's a thought there. Yeah. I might have to look into this.
It's not a good thought, but it is a thought.
You know what we'll do? We'll get Scott, our producer, to try that, and he can tell us how it worked out.
He'll open all 5 of them.
That'll go great.
It is. So some other ones that, some other strategies would be consolidate debt. Let's say you've got multiple credit cards, very high interest rates, and then you say, hey, I'm going to get out of this. I'm closing the credit cards. And then there's the chance you can go get a loan to consolidate everything at a lower interest rate. That would be more effective. But again, the key is get rid of the credit cards. Don't add to the debt. These are strategies. These are intermediate fixes, right? This isn't the long-time fix.
Yeah.
So.
And the book ends on this is I started this by saying you have to decide. You've got to make the decision without making the foundational, solid, committed decision that you're going to get out of debt, that you're going to quit accumulating debt. Without doing that, everything that we've talked about so far has just been wasted air.
Right.
Because you got to decide that. That's the front side of the book end. The back side of the book end is that the person has to remember that they have got to practice daily patience.
Oh yeah.
You got to be consistent, like the rabbit and the tortoise, that old cartoon where the rabbit was all over the place, left and right, up and down, all over the place, and the tortoise just kept trudging along. And then at the end of the race, the 5K to 10K, whatever it was they were doing, the tortoise crossed the line first. When the rabbit should have beat him by days.
Right.
But you've got to be persistently patient, and you got to commit to it. I feel for people out there who feels like they cannot get out from under it, but that's a lie.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
You can get out from under it because, heck, nobody wants to hear this, but if you're saying my income's not enough, get a second job.
Yeah, that's going back to The Richest Man in Babylon. There is a phrase in there where two people are talking, and he says, "Work is the best friend I have ever had. It's given me all of the things that I've wanted." And so, go get a job, right? Nobody wants to hear that. But let's say you're an employee somewhere and you're working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We live in the gig economy right now where there are so many things that you can do to supplement your income. You can go do DoorDash, you can do Uber, you can do Uber Eats, you can do Lyft, you can do Instacart, you can go wait tables at a restaurant, you can start up a business walking dogs, you can cut the grass in your neighborhood. There are so many ways that you can supplement your income, and if you just cannot make any space in your budget, increase your earning capacity. Go get another job. Ask for a raise at work. Whatever it is, do everything you can do to increase, as Dave Ramsey refers to it, your shovel. Get a bigger shovel.
But what if my friends see me driving an Uber and they might think less of me?
Your friends are probably broke too, so.
Okay. Okay.
Well, does it matter? Yeah. Hey, your friends might have the soul of a slave and you've got a soul of a free man, right?
There you go.
So there's some other things you can do. Hey, I don't want to get another job. Okay, that's fine. Cut expenses. I don't have any expenses I can cut though. When's the last time you compared cell phone carriers, right? Somebody will get a cell phone and they never think about it, but you could probably go get a cheaper cell phone bill somewhere else. That's going to free something. We were talking about the however many hundreds of dollars people spend eating out each month. Eat out less.
Yeah, I just a prime example of that. We've been on direct TV for years. Mm-hmm. And my direct TV bill has whopped up to $222 a month that I've been paying. And I've got this neighbor around the corner from me, and she was saying something about her YouTube television. And I didn't understand that stuff. I didn't understand it at all. But I got my YouTube subscription, the same channels, for $79 a month.
There you go. Yeah. And it's those little things that you never think about that can, it's hundreds of dollars difference that you can find. So
exactly. So that difference between $79 and $220, I can now go out and get some contract debt on the difference there. And
I can open up a credit card because I can make the payment.
There you go.
There it is. Yeah. No, but I mean, you think about it. Find cheaper, alternatives. Find ways to cut expensive. You might say, "Hey, I love Starbucks or I love Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. They make good coffee. Why don't you just make it at the house?" That's one thing. Or if you buy a name brand of something, buy something that's not name brand.
Hey, you know what? Speaking of coffee, they could actually get one of these neat, my father said, tumblers.
And you don't have to pay for that tumbler.
Yeah, you don't have to pay for it.
Save some expenses.
And you could put your coffee in this tumbler, and my gosh, you could drink your coffee and think of Ryan and I all throughout the day. And it even has our company logo on it. Is this a cheap promotion?
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, but you know what you can do if you're
so
listening? If you're listening to this and you're like, man, I'm going to get out of debt, and you do get out of debt, and you were, you're faithful, you were listening to this podcast, everything is great. Maybe what we can do is that person that gets debt free, we'll get them to come on, tell their story, and we'll give them a mug.
There you go.
That's it.
I think that would be wonderful. They can tell us about everything they did to get out of debt. And did any of the suggestions we have even have any credence?
Yeah, we're really curious about the whole 5 credit cards and just using those to pay each other off. If that works, let us know.
Yeah.
We want to know that.
Exactly.
But talking about some of the bigger debts as well, let's talk about the mortgage, because you're going to have that. If people do it on average, they're going to have it for 30 years. So some ways that you can potentially get that mortgage paid down faster and not feel it as much. There's 2 simple ones. One is just round up your mortgage payment to the nearest $100. So if you've got a mortgage payment and it costs you $1,050 a month, round it up to $1,100 a month. So it's only $50 each month that you've increased, but that's got the potential to take 3 years off of your mortgage over the course of a 30-year term. Doesn't sound like a lot, 30 years to 27 years, but I guarantee you around year 27, it's going to make a world of difference. Mm-hmm. Another option in the same vein of the mortgage is if you decide to make your payments bi-weekly instead of once a month. So if you make mortgage payments once a month, you're going to make 12 payments throughout the year. But if you cut that monthly payment in half and you pay it every 2 weeks, you end up making 26 payments. Right? So it ends up being an extra payment. You do something like that, that's got the potential to take 7 years off of your mortgage.
7 in addition to the 3.
If you did both, right? So if you just did one of the 2, you can say, hey, I've got 3 years here because I rounded up. I took 3 years off because I rounded up to the nearest 100th. Or I just made the same payment, just cut it in half, and I made it every 2 weeks. Now you're getting out 7 years. But if you did them both, you're looking at taking a decade off or near a decade of a 30-year mortgage, and you didn't really make that many changes. Now you've cut it down by a whole third. So those are some options you can use for the mortgage. The credit card stuff. Let's say you've got a credit card, you're not maxing it out, but there's a debt that you want to get rid of, or you want to try to put up some safeguards. Call the provider and ask them to lower your available credit. Hey, I've got a $15,000 limit. Ask them to knock it down to 10, right? Put up some of those safeguards. So,
how about knock it down to none?
Yeah, close it. That would be even better, right? That would be even better. Some other stuff that is, preventative is work on your emergency fund. A lot of the time when people get into credit card debt, it's because they don't have a cash reserve in the event something happens, an emergency happens. We were making that joke earlier about, hey, car repairs. I can't plan for that. Those are unexpected. How do I budget for that? Well, we do know that they're going to come, and that's what that emergency fund is for. So when the car breaks down, when you need new tires, when it's a new alternator, whatever the case is, you have got some cash reserves you can pull from instead of putting it on the credit card.
Good deal.
So we could go all day on some of those, but I think we'll just kind of leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it here. So hopefully, as we started off today, we asked, is debt the enemy of your financial future? And I'm old school. I absolutely say it is. There's going to be some people out there that's going to say, no, there's good debt. Well, I've never seen any debt that I've enjoyed sitting across from me at the house. It's, and I will tell you, being someone who owes no one a dime, that it's a good way to live. The anxiety level is just shot. I mean, it's gone away. So we encourage you, as you're preparing for your financial future, to treat debt for what it is. It is your enemy. It is not your friend, unless you go into the real estate side of it and you're looking at investing in properties and maybe some businesses and things like that. That's a whole different topic. That's a whole different discussion. We're talking to you today about consumer debt. Mm-hmm. Consumer debt is not your friend. No. It is not your friend at all. So if you want to have a successful path towards your financial journey, eliminating debt and staying debt-free is key to having a successful journey. So don't overlook that. Now, speaking of that and investments and things of that nature, we want to close with this, just reminding you, as always, we're in a time where the markets right now they seem to be just going up. We're hitting all-time highs every day. Do not fall in the trap of chasing investment returns. Mm-hmm. Instead, know your personal objective, pursue that. That way, when the market changes directions, and it will, when the market changes directions, you have your objective to measure against your objective. On behalf of Ryan, I'm Robert. I'm his dad.
This has been the My Father Said podcast, where we talk all things faith, finance, and family. We thank you for spending your time with us. And with that, we'll see you next time.
The opinions voiced in this video are for general information only and are not specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful.